Okay, here's another bitch ass fucking episode in a negative angry history project. Okay, so another episode of Christopher Columbus. We're going to go over him coming to Cibao, leaving Isabella. If you remember the last episode, if you don't remember the last episode, I'm not going to go over it because how many episodes I'm going to go do I have to backtrack on? And if you don't like this one, you're not going to like the other one. So you might as well just head over there and check them out. If not, tell me to go fuck myself. So Columbus and his crew left Isabella for Cibao. If you remember the last episode, I'm just bringing day by day Christopher Columbus. We're going through the memoirs, journals, and notes, and all that kind of shit. So we're going day by day stuff, and we're going to get through the subjective stuff later. You know, all the books where they write their opinions about shit and they lie and they omit stuff so they could tell like some weird story. Yeah, we're going to go through all those books later, but right now we're just going to go through the day-by-day memoirs and put my 2 cents on top of that. But we're going to go like 100% to what is written. I'm not going to do it exactly word for word because the words are kind of weird and they put a lot of like bullshit in there. So I'm going to basically go day by day, but just take out like weird stuff. Like, I mean, not weird stuff, but like... where he says, and the pine trees were really nice, and we took some fruit from one tree that was almost like a fig. You know, stuff like that. I'm not going to mention. Maybe at some points I will, but not on others. But we are definitely going through the day-by-day Christopher Columbus, moment by moment, if I can. So yeah, here he left Isabella, and Isabella is one of the settlements that was built by Columbus and his people prior, and the other settlement prior to that was where his people were killed. So Isabella is one of the new first places, but it was later abandoned like in the year 1498, only lasting about 4 years since it was built in the year 1494, starting to get built. The very first settlement was called La Navidad, that we talked about in previous episodes. If you don't know, go look it up. And Columbus had left some of his people behind when he traveled back to Spain in the year 1493. When they were only left with 2 ships because one of the ships sank. So Columbus didn't have room to take all of his men with him, leaving some of them behind. They're like, man, you're going to leave us here? He's like, dude, I ain't got room for you, man. Remember when the ship was sinking and then all the Taino people were crying for him and feeling bad for him, and they swam out to the ship and came out with canoes and stuff like that and helping Columbus and all those people come back to the shore. And then, so he left his people there, and then he went to Spain. We got an episode on that, and then he came back, and he's looking for his people. You know all those episodes already. I'm not going to go over all that shit, but his people were missing. And then he stopped at a couple places. Now he's going to Cibao. Okay, here we go. Yeah, but things are really weird at this point, because I was thinking like earlier today about it, like the La Navidad settlement, which might have been somewhere in the present-day Haiti. Because I was making my own map. Maybe I'll put on the video thing. I was drawing it out, just like the travels that Christopher Columbus had. Either way, so Columbus was missing his guys. They were dead. And it didn't stop European colonization, though. So they had previously built a fort at Conception de la Vega. Although Isabella was the first Spanish settlement that seemed to take a foothold, it was later abandoned for a few reasons, whether it was bad weather, failed crops, hurricanes, so on and so forth. And Isabella sat at the Puerto Plata province in the Dominican Republic. So yeah, they made their way around from Haiti to the Dominican Republic. But it's like in the center, in the interior of Dominican Republic of the island. It's interesting to see that the Europeans went inland for the settlement there, to where a lot of Europeans didn't go deep inland into Africa settlements. It's like interesting. It's like, what's the difference between the Africans and the Taino? I mean, both of them were warring with each other. I mean, of course, it was Islam was already in Africa, and there was a lot of craziness going on. And at the point of Christopher Columbus coming to America, the trans-Saharan slave trade was already, up and running well, and like for centuries at that point. And it wasn't peaking at that point, but it was still happening. And so there was a lot of war and trade and people getting stolen by the time Columbus came to America and before the transatlantic slave trade started. So, but What makes the difference? Because a lot of the natives had slaves as well, and they were fighting each other as well. So why did the Europeans, the same Europeans, Portugal and Spain, France, whatever, so on and so forth, why didn't they go into the interior of Africa more often than not? To where in America they went into the interior. Were the Taino people a lot more cooler and the African people not so cool? And they were more dangerous? Or was it Islam that was more dangerous? They didn't want to go into the interior of Africa. They were like, we're just going to trade here on the coast, man. For a lot of them. I mean, some of them went a little bit deeper into Africa than most, but anyways. So that was just a thought of mine earlier, just an observation. But it's interesting. Think about that kind of stuff. So Columbus came back and his people were dead, so they went to Cibao to find the gold and make a settlement there. And if you don't succeed, you try again. And these Europeans kept on pushing on. We said, we're going to get this motherfucker. We're going to build a city here. But obviously they succeeded because everyone in the region now is either speaking Spanish, Portuguese, or French, or whatever, right? In modern times. Although they're speaking French in Haiti, they got black gangs in that area eating people nowadays. And I wonder what Christopher Columbus would have said or would have thought of if he would have known that his success would have evolved into the area that he founded. If that area evolved into having black cannibal guys eating people in that area, he might have been like, man, screw this. It's interesting stuff, but of course he was probably thinking of himself of that day, just trying to get wealth and slaves, or not slaves, but at that point trying to get wealth and an army to back him to get back to Jerusalem and help Spain get wealthier, since they were just going through a bunch of wars themselves. But there's some interesting stuff about this episode because Christopher Columbus was taking that trip from Isabella to Cibao, and on his trip he didn't like the food. Columbus didn't like the food of the people, and Columbus sent mules to fetch bread and wine. And he didn't resort to eating the crew members or any of the Indians, but maybe he was racist. That's why he didn't eat the Indians. He's like, I don't eat brown people. It's a possibility because nowadays they're eating people. Columbus wasn't eating people back then, even though he didn't like their food. He sent mules back to go get some bread and wine. We're going to talk about it later. Yeah. But why didn't he eat the people? Because he was racist. People have called me racist before for not wanting to eat certain ethnic foods. Stupid cunts, right? As simple as that. Anyways, Friday, March 14th in the year ethnic foods are people, right? So, Friday, March 14th in the year 1494, Columbus and his crew made their way to the other side of Rio del Oro on horseback. This is possibly in the present-day El Cibao. Then they came upon another village, as in many other Indian villages that they had passed before, but not all of them. The Indians ran away into the woods, as usual, right? Don't have to describe much more because you pretty much know exactly how that goes with them, Columbus and people. But here, listen to this. Some of the Indians ran inside their houses, right? Some ran into the woods and the others ran into houses. And these Indians that ran into houses, they took some sort of cane sticks and made an X with them at their doorway to notify strangers not to enter. The Taino of this area had no doors, they had no locks, no keys, nothing like that. So they used cane sticks that were, I guess, suffice to keeping people out. Just imagine me using that stuff in Market Park area in Chicago, like back in the day when we used to get robbed. Man, my car got stolen so many times from that area. But just imagine me getting cane sticks. Maybe they needed cane sticks, but that was a black area, so they weren't up on the Taino way of culture. So just imagine me putting cane sticks there. I'd be like, man, these are cane sticks. That means don't come in. I don't have a door, but I get cane sticks. That means I'm going to sleep now. Don't break in. I wish it was that simple. So, not much happened there, and Columbus and his crew left that place and made their way for another place on the other side of a river where they would sleep for the night, and Columbus called that place Rio Verde. So if you want to look that place up on the map, find out where it was, you can find out where Christopher Columbus slept. Maybe you can find a rock that he slept on, right? They used it as a pillow. Do you ever have one of those kind of nights where you drank too much and then you woke up next to someone you would not want to sleep with if you were sober? Did you ever have one of those nights where you threw up in your friend's car and you made a fool of yourself at the party when you falling over shit? Well, that's maybe because you're fucking drunk. Well, there's some people here that can help you. But you gotta help yourself first, motherfucker. That's right, change your mind. It starts with you, bitch. Think about what you're doing. Don't be part of the problem. Be the solution. Live for today, not for yesterday or tomorrow. And if that girl keeps calling you, tell her you're busy. Busy trying to fix your motherfucking self. This video is brought to you by people that are sober. The next day, traveled on after that. They left Rio Verde. And then they passed up many other villages with round houses that had straw roofs. And these people in the villages, all these other villages, also use these cane sticks as their doorway to keep visitors out. And Columbus and his men passed these places up until they made their way to another wooded area that Columbus named Puerto de Cibao. But it's interesting that he passed all these places up and they all had the same idea to use the cane sticks for their doors, to keep people out. It wasn't a door that had a lock. It wasn't a door at all, just some sticks. Isn't that cool? Interesting. People know. They're like, do you see when the sticks are like this in front of the door? That means don't come in. I'm hanging out with my wife in here. Yeah. So anyways, So when Columbus and his guys started making their southward travels down the Indian Trail, Columbus sent some mules back to Isabela, to the town, to fetch some wine and some bread, since Columbus and his crew were running short on food and drink. Columbus and the others didn't like the Native American food of the area that much, so they sent some mules back to get some food. They believed that the food from Spain was more nourishing, that they had not grown to enjoy the native food yet. But later generations of Europeans that made their way to the American islands, they started to like the food and incorporate it more into their European dishes. Well, some years ago, I was hanging out with some Mexican people, a couple of Mexican brothers. I used to work with them, and we'd drink beer together. When I used to drink back in the day, years ago, we used to hang out in those guys' basement near the 55th and Kedzie area in Chicago. I don't know what the area is like now on 55th Street. It's kind of the same, I think. I was living down a street in the Market Park area when I was hanging out with them. And they barely spoke English, and I spoke a little bit of Spanish, but we knew enough to communicate with each other. So we just sit around and drink. And these guys would have a campfire in their backyard sometimes, and we'd just sit there drinking beer, sitting around this campfire. They didn't have a garage, but they had like this concrete slab that ran into the alley. And several nights we would drink there, and these cops would several nights this happened, these cops would chase these various Mexican guys through the yards, hopping fences and running through place to place. Cops chasing these guys. I don't know if they ever get caught, the guys, but I've seen it several nights. It's kind of crazy. And me and the brothers just sat there drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, looking at the fire, watching these cops running past us. And they seen us. They're just like, okay. Such a weird fucking thing. It was like nothing going on. Just some people sitting here at a fire and cops were chasing people through the yards. Very weird. And I went home that night and I'd watch the Channel 5 news or whatever. And they always talk about the black crime in Chicago, but never whisper anything about Mexican crime or Latin area crime. That was the first time I observed that idea that they focused on the black crime and nothing about Latin crime. Why do you think that is? It's very strange. Although I used to sleep with a Chicago cop, a few of them. One of them was an incredibly beautiful Latina cop. She was wonderful. But anyways, yeah, she had a perfect body. Man, I can remember that. I was like, man, she was great. But anyways, another cop that I knew that I used to sleep with, she told me that there was a lot of crime in black areas. Like the most crime is in the black areas, and she says the Latin areas are pretty bad too, among other things that are there that are pretty bad, all bad. And but she says most of it's in the black areas, so that's why they focus on that. And but she says most of the news lies. But anyways, back to the two brothers. So I was it was one of the days I was at the brother's house, the two brothers, and one of them took some tacos out that they made the day before or whatever, and they made some tacos, and they gave me some tacos. I mean, that one of the brothers was eating, and I took a bite, and it was like a bunch of bones in the food, and like I would eat it, and it was like poking me in the gums and the teeth, and I was like, what the hell? And I was like, man, this is weird. And the guy gave me a napkin so I could spit it out. And he's like, oh, you got to pick the bones out. I was like, why would you put bones in your food like this? It was like some kind of beef, like mixed up with like other types of things. It was very strange. And then after that, the other brother started yelling at this guy in Spanish, and I didn't understand a word he was saying, but I understood that like he was yelling at him for giving me that food because I could have died. I could have choked on that food. So I was like wondering, there's a lot of times I eat, not a lot, but I've eaten steak tacos, and the steak tacos aren't inedible. They don't have bones in them, but they're like, they usually use like garbage meat and stuff, I guess. Like, what the hell? So I'm wondering if Christopher Columbus had one of these kind of foods. He was like, man, I don't want to eat bones today, or I don't want to eat inedible steak. Although the Taino were eating iguana, right? Maybe he didn't want to eat iguana, or that big kind of rat that they were eating, or some parrot. He didn't want to eat it. He was like, I'd rather have some bread and wine. Very strange. So that's just an observance. It's just like one thing I thought was very interesting I'd bring up in an episode. But yeah, Christopher Columbus sent his mules back to get some bread and wine. So I'm going to get through some more of these memoirs. And a couple days later, after he slept by that river. On March 16th, the men with the mules came back with the supplies from Isabella. And then they took the food, and then they eventually made their way to Cibao. So it's just interesting in Columbus's writings or namemoirs. He had to send the men back for the bread and wine. He preferred that food over the Native American food. I mean, were the Taino dishes that bad? These guys passed a bunch of little Indian villages up and didn't eat any of the food. It's very crazy. I'm the kind of person that will eat almost anything, and I'm not picky. I even eat tacos sometimes, and Columbus had to send his mules to get some food. Craziness. He's like, I don't want to eat iguana today or rat soup. Anyways, the first site of Cibao was of a stone area. There's a lot of rock and mountainous area. They were separated by patches of grass, and there were rivers throughout the area in which Columbus and his men found a lot of gold in. They're like, man, we're rich, man, we're rich. Too bad the food's not as good. The more that the Christians traveled on, the more mountainous the terrain got. And then in the streams, they found more gold as well. There was gold everywhere, they said. Columbus assumed that the rains washed down the gold from the mountainsides to where they found a lot of gold by the river's edges. And there were a few trees in the area, they said. They saw mostly pine trees and palm trees there, scattered throughout. And since this guy named Ojeda had already found this area sometime before, the Indians already knew of the Europeans' presence. And so the Taino greeted Columbus at some areas. They're like, hey, man, you here? Here's some food and here's some gold. And he's like, you could keep the food, I'll just take the gold. The Europeans didn't like the food. It's like, what are you going to do? What you going to do about it? But they were pleased about the amount of gold they received. Like, hell yeah, man. Going to make this stuff into a necklace. A guy, Alonso de Ojeda, was just another explorer that was part of the Columbus crew that founded this place. And Ojeda later traveled with Amerigo Vespucci, that guy that they named America after Columbus had showed up. Ojeda found the gold-filled mountains in the region of Cibao, but he also is known for naming Venezuela. But anyways, the Europeans traveled on horseback for about 18 leagues to this point of Cibao, to which Columbus decided to make a fort there that he named Fort of Santo Tomas. And they believed that this was the best place to receive gold in the area. The apostle Tomas doubted Jesus coming back from the dead. Tomas said that he wouldn't believe in Jesus until Jesus resurrected, until he is able to put his finger through the nail holes of Jesus' hand. And then Jesus came back from the dead, warped his presence, and appeared like on the Star Trek episode, and then let Tomas stick his finger in the wound and feel around. Tomas was then convinced. And if you don't believe in Jesus, ask him to appear so you could stick your finger in his wound and find out for yourself. But until then, you won't be convinced. I get it. Muhammad of Islam talked to a ghost in a cave. So which is more believable? You know, people kill for these ideas. People literally kill and die for these ideas. Anyways, the fort was named after Tomas. If you don't believe there's gold in the area, you could come and find out for yourself. You won't have to stick your finger into anybody's wound, but you could just search with your eyes. Look, I think I see some. So yeah, in this area, Columbus elected a man named Pedro Margaret to be the lead man of the area and to watch over 56 men that Columbus had left to build and guard the fort there in the area of Cibao. The men built the fort of rock and wood. And so they made the fort strong enough to resist any attack from the natives. And why were they, I was like wondering, was it that bad that they had to build a fort to protect themselves against the natives? I mean, their men were killed from the Navidad, and there were a couple battles before that, but it seems more peaceful up until this point, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like you're anything crazy, and they're like, build it strong, just in case. And when they were building and digging, they came across some beautiful marbles, he said, like stones and other round stones that strangely looked like they were made of as a cannonball size, like the size of oranges or something like that. They found some pieces of jasper. They're like, man, it's cool stuff here. This was around the year 1494 on March 17th. This is kind of around the time that this was going on. And this is just an observation. This episode is just an observation of Columbus founding an area. And it's interesting to hear about his daily happenings. And how they didn't like the native food, and it was hard for the horses to travel through the area. It's cool stuff to hear about. Just you wonder, it gives people personality. It gives history personality. And there was no mention of battles or subjugation on these days. It was just another day, just a regular day in the middle of an island. Dominican Republic. And there's, the interesting thing is I saw that there's over 400 wild edible plants in Spain that you could eat off the land. And garlic is one of those plants. It's a natural antibiotic, but you like it better if it's cooked. But the natives didn't, it's interesting that the natives didn't have anything similar to these plants for Columbus to eat instead of having the mules go fetch some bread and wine instead. It's kind of weird. But maybe Columbus didn't like the hot peppers or spicy foods that they had. Now that's a possibility. Hey, you could light my arm on fire when I eat. It will hurt at first, but the fire will eventually burn out and my skin will heal. I love the taste of burning in my mouth. It feels so special. Third-degree burns on my arm hurt, but I could take the pain more than you, because I'm tough. The hot will go away if you drink some milk. You could punch yourself in the face. You'll eventually get used to it and it'll feel good. I love spicy stuff. It burns my mouth so badly. Anyways, so I was looking, after I was reading about this particular area, since this episode is focused on the Cibao region of the Dominican Republic. In this same region, in the year 2022, crime started to drop a little a little bit when the army teamed up with the police to battle crime. And so, what can help these people be better today? Are they more dangerous now than they were then, or were they more dangerous then as they are now? What did the Taino do 500 years ago before colonization? And why can't they do that now? Make a grass hut and eat some iguana. I mean, what would Christopher Columbus do if he came to that area right now? He'd be like, man, this is crazy over here. Well, the demographics are a little bit different now, aren't they? So anyways, I'm going to end this episode. That's about it. You could not subscribe to this channel, and you could hate me for it, and you could send this, share this episode with your enemies, and I'll hate you for it as well. I have a Patreon now. Somebody suggested it on this in the comments, so I opened one account. I have one tier, but I don't have a second tier yet because I don't have extra episodes yet. I don't want to make an extra episode for just one person. It's like me being in a really large auditorium with a microphone, and I only have one fan in the bleachers. And they'd be like, "You're the best, man." I'd be like, "Thanks." "You could do it." I'd be like, "Thanks." So I don't want, one subscriber to, on a second tier. And then I would have to go the extra mile for that one person. So I would have to wait until I get like 50 or 100 people. Then I could do that second tier. I don't know. Maybe I'll do just something special on Patreon alone. I do it already for Rumble and Spotify and other platforms. So maybe I'll do that for Patreon so I can get people on there. It was just a suggestion, and I'm trying it out. So anyways, that's it. Check it out on Patreon. Angry Negative History Project or channel, however we called it. So that's it. Anyways, adios.